Hello, 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 and welcome to Updog Sports Talk on this beautiful Wednesday evening. My name is Matt Miller, and today I am joined by Just McGovern. What's going on, dude?
Hey, the weather is so nice out right now, but that is not what we're here to talk about today. If you've been following along, you'll know that we have been in a series where we are grading the 2024 college football season for each FBS program, and today we are wrapping that up with the Mountain West, Conference USA, and we'll even touch on a few select FCS teams as well. So come join us. It's been a fun series, and this will be how we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, and if this is your first time with us, first of all, welcome. Second of all, we're a program that prides ourselves on sticking up for the little guy, and this episode actually pretty much defines that. Mountain West, Conference USA, FCS teams don't get a whole lot of representation unless you're Ashton Genty in the Heisman conversation. But outside of him, not much representation. So we are here gladly to talk about these teams, and we are Updog Sports Talk. And with that being said, Justin, let's jump right into to FCS. Let's go.
All right, we'll kind of ditch our alphabetical order for a second here. To talk about the two FCS teams that are transitioning into Conference USA next year. So this is kind of our bridge from Conference USA to FBS. First, we'll talk about the Missouri State Bears. You know, they're entering FBS. Entering 2024, it was like, okay, but what are they going to do? Are they going to redshirt guys? How is this team even going to look? They struggled the year before. They didn't even have that great of a record with Bobby Petrino as their coach. Like, they've been trying to find ways to have success, and hadn't really found any. So it's like, what are they going to do here? And I didn't know what to expect from them when I saw them in Missoula, Montana, to open out the year. And Missouri State ended up impressing me that day. Their quarterback, Jacob Clark, was throwing dimes, hitting his receivers in tight windows, and his receivers are coming down with it. They didn't have much run game to speak of, but overall, like they hung in that game until the end and looked pretty solid. And I was like, okay, this team has a shot here to be pretty solid in their last FCS season. And they end up 8-4. How would you grade it?
They have a really good year. I give them a B plus A minus area. Their losses were to Ball State, which I feel like they probably could have won that game. And then the other three losses that they took were to the three favorites to win the FCS championship. So you can't really complain about that. They also seem to be like, you know what? We're out. We're going up a level. See you guys.
I gave him an A minus. Obviously the top three in FCS, that was kind of hard to deal with. They were very close to beating Ball State at least, and that's with this. We'll get to this in a moment, but this is with having a shorter amount of scholarship players. Like, they were a number of scholarship players to still be counted in FCS polls. We'll get to that a little bit more when we talk about Delaware, but so even with that, like they found themselves, hanging with Ball State with less scholarship players, and then only losing to the toughest teams. They ended up beating a lot of teams that they considered rivals on their way out, and that had to feel good. Being teams like Illinois State and Southern Illinois saying, "Hey, goodbye, guys. We're out of here. Guess what? Got a nice win to head out with." So I gave them an A minus for that. Pretty solid year by Missouri State, and I think their future in FBS is looking pretty promising now.
Yeah, I'm excited for them.
Next, the Delaware Blue Hens. This team was hard to keep track of because of the aforementioned thing I was saying before. Delaware was not counted in the FCS polls because they had too many scholarship players to be counted. So this was a hard team to grade because of that, because they were competing with a lot of teams that had less scholarship players than they did. Delaware ended up going 9-2 though. Pretty good effort on their way out. How would you grade your season?
I'm gonna give them an A. They did have a good year. They lost to Villanova and Richmond, two teams that were at the top of the CAA, Coastal Athletic Association. Yeah, on their way out, not a bad way to do things. So I hate how FCS does it, where if you have too many scholarship players, you're not included in the polls. I think that's just weird.
Well, I mean, you think about it though, like they do have a significant advantage.
Yeah, I guess so.
It was weird too, though, because for Villanova and Richmond, like this still had to be like counted as a good win for them.
Yeah.
Like, so the committee still evaluates them like that, but it was just a very weird situation. I give them a B plus. Didn't lose to any bad FCS teams. Again, both of them were in the top 10, won a playoff game, the teams they lost to, that is. And I mean, it was pretty solid, but again, they were working with more scholarship players than other teams. So, I had to grade them on a bit of a curve because they had an advantage a little bit, but I think Delaware too is looking pretty strong as they head up to FBS. Now we will go back to alphabetical order here, and we are really going to dive into FCS because these are all just pure FCS teams. We look at the Chattanooga Mocs. Chattanooga is fun to say, first of all, but they were a team that entering 2024 seemed to be one that was poised for a breakthrough. Was probably one of the favorites to win the SoCon and was thought to be a team that could go on a pretty good FCS playoff run. They ended up going 7-5 and missing the playoffs. How would you grade your season?
My window just crashed for FCS, so I missed who we were talking about.
Chattanooga.
I actually gave him a better grade than it sounds. I gave him a B plus. Their losses were to Western Carolina and Samford and Mercer. Western Carolina and Mercer finished ahead of them. Samford was a bad loss. But Chattanooga had a fairly good season.
Yeah. I ended up giving them a C minus. I think I was a little bit let down by that. I thought they would make the playoffs. Probably let one or two of those games that they should have had slip away a little bit. Especially, I think the Samford game clearly was the one that cost them that playoff spot. So I gave them a C minus for it. I think it was a little bit below expectations. And we'll see, I mean, in general, we'll see how the entire SoCon kind of retools a little bit because, only getting one team in the FCS playoffs was very disappointing for the conference. And it felt like they were better than that. So they'll need to kind of figure out like what their strategy is moving forward to get more teams in. But looking at an area where there were more FCS playoff teams, the Idaho Vandals, came into the year with looking like a pretty good team. They faced a brutal schedule and ended up 10-3. Two of those losses being to Montana State. And by the way, the other one was to the Oregon Ducks. How would you grade the season?
Justin, you did not include the Idaho Vandals in the list of teams to grade.
Yeah, I did. Remember? That was the last one I added.
Whatever. I think they had a fairly good season. They were in a very tough conference. Big Sky was jacked. But yeah, I gave him a B plus.
Nice. I give him an A minus. I think they would have hoped to, I mean, it felt like a chance to compete for the championship, but the problem was like Montana State was just such a wagon. And they ran into that twice, both times in Bozeman, unfortunately. I really did love how is like, I think it was like a Friday night game that they played them, and they went down with a bang. Like they were not going to just sit there and let Montana State steamroll them. No, they were emptying out the playbook to try to have a chance. And I mean, everything they tried just didn't work because Montana State was just that good. But I at least respected their efforts. A minus overall. I mean, you can't really dock a team too much for losing to all road games at Montana State and at Oregon. So pretty good year overall for Idaho. And we stay in the same state. We are covering all three Idaho teams tonight. Well done.
Hell yeah.
The Idaho State Bengals. This is a different level of program. This is one that was just looking for, trying to make steps in the right direction, working towards competing. Moving up in the Big Sky, which is obviously a very loaded league, but they made steps in the right direction, going 5-7. How would you grade your season?
I gave him a C plus. They were on the outskirts looking in. The top 5 teams in the conference are wagons. And they were a distant 6th. So it was hard to give them a better grade, but you can't knock them for playing an absolutely stacked conference. So gave him a C plus.
Yeah, I give him a B minus. I really liked, the progress they made. 5 wins is a good step in the right direction. One of the better seasons they've had in a little bit here. Second year under Cody Hawkins, definitely going in the right direction. The offense was a lot of fun to watch. Had a lot of, they had a strong passing game, and, were able to find a run game to complement that. The one thing that really held them back and kept them from making next steps was just, their defense struggled to get stops. And obviously and famously was the Eastern Washington game on the Inferno turf, where Eastern Washington literally completed the perfect game against them, which was all 11 drives were touchdowns, which is even hard to do in College Football 25. Hey, we may still do a College Football 25 reference in this show.
Nice.
So that was kind of their disappointment part. They need to work on the defense this offseason. I think they will. I am really excited for the future of Idaho State's football team. I think they're going to continue to work in the right direction. Now we move our way back up to the top of FCS with our national champions, the North Dakota State Bison. Bison, I stand corrected.
A plus. I don't think you can do it any better. I don't think that they really should be in FCS. I think they would be competitive at the FBS level. But here we are. We're talking about an FCS team that is absolutely stacked, has history on their side, and continues to win championships. What is that, 10 championships in the last 15 years or something like that?
Yeah, something crazy like that. And the funny thing is, though, like they saw a challenger show up. Their rival across the Dakota marker, South Dakota State, had stepped up. South Dakota State won the national championship the last 2 years. And, North Dakota State had to answer that bell. Were they going to be able to step up and wrestle this thing away from their rivals? They did. On that road to the championship game, they beat South Dakota State, took them down. Obviously, their quarterback at the end of that game, in his post game interview saying, I hate the Jackrabbits. Was one of the coolest moments ever. And then to top it all off, Montana State had looked like a wagon all year, and North Dakota State thoroughly beat them too. This was not a path of the playoffs that was easy. They faced probably the toughest possible opponent in each round and just steamrolled all of them.
Yeah.
So I give them an A+ as well. This was the best team at the FCS level. Their only losses were to Colorado by 5, and then a late upset against South Dakota. So very good season by North Dakota State. Next, we look at the Montana Grizzlies. Entering the season, projected to be one of the top teams at the FCS level again, but they were kind of trying to figure out who their quarterback was going to be. Their starter transferred out, replacing some pieces on the defense. And I don't think it was quite as smooth as expected. They ended up going 9-5. How would you grade your season?
I give them a B. They did make the FCS bracket, but they only made it to the second round before they got blown out by South Dakota State. I wanted to see more from this team. I wanted to see the 2023, 2024.
2023.
Yeah,
into 2024.
Yeah,
they only played the championship game in 2024, but yeah.
I wanted to see that Montana team this year. I think that would have made this playoff bracket just extremely wonky and probably would have put FCS up ahead in people's minds. But I mean, they had a winning record. They made the championship. You can't give them a bad grade on it.
Yeah, I give them a B-. I think overall, it was still a season where they made the playoffs. That was good. It's just a very weird year because it felt like there's something going on with each of their games. There's some games where their defense couldn't get stops. They had back-to-back games where them and their opponent combined for over 100 points, which was just, wild. Crazy offensive shootouts. And then immediately after that 2-game stretch, I think was the game against Portland State, where it was 3-0 at halftime. And then I think that was one of their few wins that ended up being somewhat routine in the second half. But even then, of course, the power went out of the stadium, and we saw the game get called from someone from the booth calling into the studio and calling the game. It was one of the most funny things ever. And then they had the Brawl of the Wild, where an absolute crazy windstorm came out of nowhere in the middle of it. It was just a very weird year for Montana. I think they're hoping for a little bit more routine in 2025. Next, we look at we go to the East Coast here, the Rhode Island Rams. One of the highlights of the New England region, the Rams went 11-3 and made the FCS playoffs, plus won a game in the FCS playoffs for the first time since 1985. Quick quiz question for you. Who was the team they beat in 1985? I'll give you a hint. They play at the FBS level now.
Sam Houston State.
No.
James Madison.
One more guess.
Appalachian State.
The Akron Zips. You had to think about someone that was in FBS for a while. Yes, so this was an impressive year by Rhode Island. Go ahead and give your grade.
A. They had a great season. Maybe even A+.
Yeah, I ended up giving them A+ as well. This season was a huge breakthrough for the Rams. I'm excited to see what they're going to do in the future now. They could probably become one of the top teams in the CAA. I know the CAA definitely is expecting, has a void at the top now with Richmond moving to the Patriot League. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how the Rams move forward. I was definitely excited to see the season from them. I was very happy for them. For this historic season, it was historic. Now we look at the Sacramento State Hornets. This team entered the season looking like one of the most dangerous FCS teams. They've been a top 10 FCS team the last few seasons, and they plummeted to 3-9. That was a great season.
I give them an F. But guess what, Justin?
What?
Do you know what they did this offseason?
Hang on, let me give a grade first. I give him a D-. Okay, so anyways, now you can introduce the offseason. The offseason, I think it's why we want to talk about this team.
Yeah, that's the only reason why we're talking about them. They won the offseason. They got Michael Vick as their head coach. Not only are they
that's Norfolk State.
Well, you know what? I had to add a little bit of humor into the show.
They hired.
They almost hired Michael Vick.
Anyways, they hired Brendan Marion and are bringing the go-go offense to Sacramento State. I know they're both green. I guess Matt got way too excited there. But yeah, they're bringing the go-go offense to Sacramento State. They are hitting the recruiting trail hard right now. Bringing in a lot of exciting transfers. And then, while the transfer portal is being used for 2025, they are on fire in 2026. Their recruiting class of 2026 right now is ahead of Alabama.
Dang.
And many, many, many other FBS teams. Like, they are absolutely cooking. Like, what is cooking up at Sacramento State? And, obviously, also on top of it all, like, there's been a lot of talks to FBS, and, they're even seemingly working on raising money to go up there and even take the Liberty route, being independent for a bit until they get a conference. Like, all of that's going on right now. This is a program that they seem to have found a window to make a move, and they're trying to make moves right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So exciting times in Sacramento.
About the only thing good about Sacramento right now.
So moving on, we'll go to the Citadel Bulldogs. Decided to look at them because we have quite a few followers that are big the Citadel fans, and I wanted to get to talk about this team just because I don't think we get to see a whole lot of areas to give them shout outs. So it's been a long road for them lately. They've been struggling, but they improved to 5-7 this past year. How would you grade your season?
I give them a C. They're in a really tough conference. Mercer's a wagon. Western Carolina had a really good season. Chattanooga had a really good season. East Tennessee State had a good season. So can't really fault them a whole lot when they're playing some good teams. So had to go with the C.
Yeah, I give them a B-. I was impressed with the steps forward they took. I think this was, a huge positive. I think the Citadel, I think we could really start to see them kind of step up here in the future.
I'm frozen, Justin.
Huh?
I'm frozen. Okay. My computer froze. All I wanted to do was switch tabs, and I don't know why. Everything froze.
All right. I was getting worried there. I was like, is that at my end or your end? Anyways, we got distracted there. But yeah, I think the future is bright for the Bulldogs program. Like, I think we could start to see them continue to chip away towards the top of the SoCon and, maybe make their way in the playoffs here in a few years.
Yeah.
Next, we look at UC Davis, the Aggies. This ended up being a team that, was one of the more surprise teams to break into the top 5. They had a very senior heavy group, and they broke through. UC Davis went 11-2. Lost in the quarterfinals. But how would you grade your season?
I would give them an A+, Justin. They had a fantastic season. They came out of nowhere. Nobody expected them to do anything. They were competitive against Cal. They lost a 2-point game to Montana State. And then they did lose by a couple touchdowns to South Dakota in the playoff. But they had a hell of a season. I can't even complain about any of those losses.
Yeah, and I stand corrected there. They did lose 3 games. Seems I got their regular season record for some reason. But yeah, no. They beat Montana on the road. That was a Big Sky After Dark game. Like, that game was on linear TV. And I think really for a lot of people in the nation, they got introduced to UC Davis football that day. And It was glorious. I'm going to miss some of the players they had because, their quarterback, Miles Hastings, was a lot of fun. Running back, Lan Larson, true football guy. Underrated draft prospect. I think he was a lot of fun to watch. And, obviously gonna miss a lot of the pieces of this team, but it was a special season for the Aggies. And now, it's kind of an interesting future because their other sports are moving to the Mountain West. And, word out there is they're probably taking advantage of the money they're going to get from that, kind of work towards upgrading more of their football facilities. And who knows? We may see this program at FBS before too long.
Or at the very least, can we get them in college football 26? So if we don't get them in Mountain West, we can just put them in the Mountain West?
Yes. I mean, come on now. We're talking about FCS schools here. We want them in the game. That is for my college football 26 buy list, which is, this is completely off topic, but for my college football 26 buy list, like, FCS schools are it. I need that. That is my requirement, or I'll probably pass up buying the game.
Same.
All right, let's wrap up this FCS level and this amazing series. We wrap it up by talking about, this was a request from our friends at the College Football Commission. A great one, by the way. The UT Martin Skyhawks. They went 9-5, won an FCS playoff game. How would you grade your season, Matt?
I mean, can you give them anything other than an A? I mean, they had to face an FBS ranked opponent in Kansas State. They had to face Southeast Missouri State, who is very solid, and they had to face Missouri State. They did take a 1-point loss to Tennessee Tech, and then they lost to Montana State in the second round. But Montana State made it to the championship game. So can't really fault them a whole lot. They just got tough schedule.
Yeah.
So I like that pick by College Football Commission. Shout out.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a breakthrough for them because, this has been a team that's really been knocking on the door a lot. 2023, they had a tie for the conference championship and lost the tiebreaker. I'm trying to remember which year it was. It was either 2023 or 2022, where they had a tiebreaker that came down to a literal coin toss. Their season came down to a coin toss, and they lost it and did not reach the playoffs because of that. They have won or tied their conference title the last 4 years. And half of those years they didn't reach the playoffs because they lost the tiebreaker. So 2024, they lost the tiebreaker too, by the way. They reached the playoffs in an at-large bid. But yeah, they finally hit their breakthrough. That blowout of New Hampshire, 41-10, was just very, very impressive. And I think, with some changes among the other teams atop the Big South OVC Association, man, that's a mouthful. Southeast Missouri State losing their quarterback. Tennessee State just lost Eddie George this week. UT Martin is looking like the top program in this conference.
Yep, and I'm excited to see it. But guess what, Justin? We just did grades for 146 college football teams.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
In 4 weeks.
Yeah, that's really tiring work for us, but probably entertaining for a lot of y'all. That is that part of the show. Last episode we talked about Bowling Green not having a coach. Justin, you just alluded to it a little bit ago. Eddie George did sign a 5-year deal to become the next head coach of the Bowling Green Falcons. I'm super excited. I have been seeing nothing but smiles coming from everybody in Northwest Ohio, except for Toledo fans. But everybody in Bowling Green is just all smiles. Everybody's so happy there. So congrats to Eddie George getting that contract. We're super excited. Please don't leave us. And if you do, leave in November or December so we have time to find a decent coach. But yeah, I'm excited to see the mentality that he brings to campus. And Justin, the winds are changing up in Northwestern Ohio.
Oh, yes, it is. I mean, this is just so exciting. Like, Eddie George was the perfect hire. It kind of took a little bit to work in the background, but and obviously there's some angst in there, especially if you watch last week's episode, you could definitely tell that. But I'm very thrilled with this hire. It was very funny actually because we're up in Toledo area this past weekend, and then on the way back stopped to Bowling Green, kind of got a refresher of Bowling Green gear a little bit. Wore my new Bowling Green sweatshirt on Sunday, and then they hired Eddie George. It's like, yes, all right, this is perfect.
Now you have to go back up there and get another hoodie so they can win the national championship.
All right, yes. I'll do that next.
Yeah, and for those of you who didn't watch us last week, we did get our logo on the back of an ARCA Series NASCAR. It was such an honor. Shout out to Brayton Laster. You ran a hell of a race, kid. Kept the car on the track, avoided wrecks, and kept all the parts intact while you're on the track. So did a really good job, and it was an honor to be on your car. And Justin found out some figures that we can talk about off camera on how much it costs to sponsor the same size patch on a car.
Yeah, huge moment for us for sure. That was special. And then finally, I think the last bit of housekeeping items, obviously, as we were going here, I was watching the American Eagles clinch their berth to the NCAA tournament. So, we've been very much attuned with college basketball. Stay tuned next week as we go through our NCAA tournament bracket.
Hell yeah.
Can't believe it's that time of year. March Madness is here, man.
I know, dude. Like, I think that we need to get, and it's going to be hard to figure out what side of the bracket is what, because they don't do it the same way they did back then. But I think we need to try to plug as many of these teams into March Madness 2008 or yours NCAA basketball 2010 to see how many we can get right based on our own computer simulations, because that's the only thing we have to go on.
There we go. Oh man, yeah. That was always a fun activity to do, was to see if we could outsmart the machines. And then my wife fills out a bracket each year, and that's always a lot of fun. Which we'll have to see. She tends to be pretty biased, so if if VCU if VCU makes it, I would fully expect her to take VCU to win it all, and I'm all for
it. Justin is probably going to go off camera here in just a minute.
it.
Just kidding. But yeah, that is the show. Follow us at Updog Sports Talk on X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, TikTok, YouTube since you're watching, or if you're listening on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music. I know I'm forgetting iHeartRadio. We're on everything. So follow us, like us, subscribe, show us some love. Tell your friends about us. We're trying to grow our channel and trying to represent the little guy. So we will catch you next time, and we will talk about college basketball.
Yeah, March Madness.
See you guys.